Hi everyone, welcome to another game in ChessUp 2. We are going to play hopefully again black pieces, but we had black pieces last time around, so it's possible that we will need to be turning the board around. If we are playing black, we will indeed stick with the Sicilian for now. And we are playing white pieces, so I believe it was the e4 move, and we are going to indeed to try and play the Vienna type of position. Black is playing c6, which is fine. Just let me turn the board for you. So let's adjust the board the way we like it. E4 should be, yeah. Probably thanks to the lights and everything, the board is slightly misaligned. But I hope you understand it's not all asymmetrical as on online chessboard. So black is preparing d5 and wants to be able to recapture with probably the c pawn, bring more pawns in the center. We are going to continue with our favorite Vienna setup. Black plays d5. And again, if black decides ever to take on e4, we always want to be able to recapture with the pawn on d. So we will also always allow the endgame, which could be fine for us. My only worry is that in this endgame, we might have a slight issue with this knight. So we are playing against a player who's 1359. His name is Guillemela. With double L. We are so far 1327. I'm really looking forward to the update in March, where ChessUp will be introduced to Lichess, so we will be able to play using this lovely setup. So now the question is, normally I should not be afraid to capture the queen with the king or with the knight. More strategical is usually to recapture with the knight, so we still retain the right to castle, but as we are entering an endgame, this shouldn't be such a big problem, whether we capture with the king or with the knight. Although once black is going to develop these pieces, they will be castling and checking us with the tempo. However, as you can see, the e6 and c6 pawns, they are both taking squares from the bishop and the knight. However, I will recapture with our knight, but not for the reason with regard to castling, but because the knight doesn't have any scope here just yet, and we will try and reposition the knight somewhere on more active square, which eventually be the b4 square. There's like a little speed bump on the chessboard. It's probably case of most of the chessboard, as there are some electronics underneath. Doesn't feel all that smooth underneath. Here there's a little bump. So black plays bishop d6 almost without thinking. And now we need to decide where we would like to keep our pieces and how would we like our pieces to be placed. So I believe knight to e3 is already a move that comes into question, because then we should be able to attack the bishop with knight to c4. So I'm going to go and play knight to e3, as this move could win us a tempo with knight to c4. Knight to f6 is attacking our pawn on e4, which is indeed a threat, which is worth addressing. But the move knight f6 also opens some tactics, some potential tactics on e5. I believe our bishop would be better placed here for now, thanks to our wanting to play the e5 move. However, we are going to place it here because our next move will probably be knight to f3, threatening the e5 anyway. So we will start with bishop d3. I'm not a fan of bishop d3 move, as the bishop could potentially prevent our entry on the d file. So black maybe wants to develop his bishop onto a6, maybe wants to place the knight there later on as well. So our idea will be to just develop the knight. See, this knight is already doing something, as this knight is prevented from jumping onto g4. Normally more precise move for us would be to play f3 to protect the e4 pawn and also restrict the knight here. But so far this bishop and the knight are doing those two jobs. Move like c5 could be slightly annoying, as this diagonal could potentially be dangerous for us, and white sees the potential issue with our move. However, it looks like we can already start pressure against this pawn just by simply playing knight to c4, hitting both the bishop and the pawn one more time. So the best response to this would be king e7 to protect this bishop, but we are already winning the pawn. I don't see a defense against knight takes e5. So it looks like we are winning the pawn on e5 already. So I used to be afraid of these type of endgames before, but ever since I read some course on the endgame from this very position of the Philidor, and the endgame that the Leela basically recommends against Caro-Kann, I'm starting to more and more like these types of positions, as they are giving quite a good advantage to the side that understands these positions. So we are winning the pawn on e5 indeed. Now the pleasant option we have is just to decide which knight would be the best to capture with. And my feeling is that this knight would be better to capture, as this knight still controls the e3 square, and we might want to play bishop e3 in some cases to challenge the bishop in here. So again, looks like a healthy pawn from here. So we're definitely going to grab it. And we can then try and bolster our knight with move f4. We are also putting pressure on this pawn, which is temporarily protected with the other knight. And next we might want to challenge this bishop with bishop e3, or just simply to castle. So bishop h3 is taking away our castling, and it's threatening bishop g2, as white would be attacking this pawn twice. So it's a quite sneaky move, to be honest. It's a quite sneaky move to play bishop g2 and then capture here. So we are not able to castle. Another problem also is if this knight was ever to be kicked and go here, then bishop g2 is like a really dangerous tactic for both the knight here and the rook here. So it almost feels as I would want to play rook g1 here to prevent bishop g2, but it's worth considering other options as well. For example, if I challenge the bishop with move bishop e3, white plays bishop g2 and we play rook g1. So bishop e3, bishop g2, rook g1. If bishop e3, then we have rook takes g2. If bishop e3, bishop g2, rook g1, bishop e4, then we have bishop c5. And if bishop d3, we have knight takes d3. And if bishop bc5, then we have knight takes c5, and we are still going to be up a pawn. And I feel like bishop e3 is really good alternative to our other moves. Also, if bishop e3, then bishop e3, knight takes e3. The knight from e3 covers both of these squares that are important to us. So I feel like bishop e3 is a playable move. We are also getting rid of this bishop, so eventually the knight can jump onto d6, which could actually be quite bad for black if they were to take first here. Then knight d6 takes e4 wins that bishop on e4, and that would spell end of the game. So it's a bit of a tactical solution what we have right now, but hopefully it is working. As you can see, we have developed 4 pieces again against 3 pieces of black. Black is being held by this pawn, so it created a slight weakness, And again, if you focus in your game more on development of your pieces than your opponent, then more likely you're going to have advantage in your games. Obviously, things have to be strategically sound, because you cannot just play unsound opening and hope for the best, or unsound moves. So again, straight out of the, even though this could be classified as an endgame, it's still more close to queenless middle game. And as you can see, it can get quite complicated even in the middle game itself. Or if you like to classify this as an endgame, then by all means. So now the idea would be to take on d7. If knight takes, then it feels like capturing on d7 is something that we should do. Another option is also to take with knight onto c6. But knight to c6 appears to be too greedy. And taking on c5, actually allowing the knight to go here, could present a challenge to the pawn on e4. However, we need to resolve this knight right now. And knight to f3 is a blunder for bishop g2, as previously mentioned. And the tactics after knight c6, bishop g2, rook g1, bishop e4, they don't no longer work. After bishop c5, knight c5, the knights are protecting enough time on e4. So this just feels like we are going to trade. After all, we are pawn up. So black trades some more. And now I thought about option to make this a little bit tricky for our opponent. And that is to trade here first. And now my idea is to offer a trade of bishops. Now, if opponent takes and I take with a king, they will not be able to capture on e4, as I will be pinning their knight with the rook. After you defend the knight with f5, we have f3 undermining the knight. And after bishop f1, bishop e6, we will just simply have a move with pawn to f3, protecting this pawn chain, and then we'll be ready to castle long. If bishop g4 happens, then we have simply moved bishop g2, again with the idea to play e3, or later on to play We can also play knight e5 as a response to that move. So I definitely feel like playing bishop f1 and rather trading their good bishop for our rather bad bishop because of this e4 pawn. So it's very tricky. Black will be thinking that they can take a pawn on e4 if they trade the bishop on f1, and if they don't spend too much time thinking, they can easily fall for it. But then bishop g4 happens. And now one of my ideas also is to play knight to e5, hitting the bishop itself. However, that could sometimes, in some lines, it could slightly backfire. But we will be looking at this very pawn here. So knight to e5 might not be the most precise move, but it could be the working move. So I don't know how far can I push it. So after bishop g2, I would expect black to castle. Then knight e5, knight c6. We're going to play bishop g2 first. This knight doesn't seem to have any reasonable squares to go to. We definitely want to place bishop on the long diagonal here. Black castles, which is very reasonable. And now we don't want to waste too much time, so we're going to play knight to e5, hitting the bishop. And at the same time we are hitting the pawn on c6. So the question is, where is the bishop gonna go? What is he gonna do about the pawn on c6? The idea is, if bishop d7 happens, we can castle, but at the same time we can probably push the b4 pawn forward. So if bishop e6 happens, now there is nothing that can prevent us from taking on c6. We also have like a really interesting trap on after long castle, bishop a2, there's a b3, but that allows actually black to win 3 pawns by sacrificing one of their pieces for them. So right now I feel like we're gonna be greedy and take another pawn. And the reason we are taking the pawn, because the knight is protected from all the rooks, because the rook move here means knight e7 check, winning the rook. So there could be no tempo winning on the knight itself. Black is playing a move like a5, which is a fine move. We will protect this pawn, because I don't really want black to sacrifice for two pawns on b3, so I'll just play a move like a3, just so I can castle long. Black cannot challenge even a d-file, because simply the knight is protecting on the d-file. And if our knight is challenged by the bishop, then knight e5 should be a move that helps. So now black is obviously lining against our e4 pawn, which is reasonable. And it might allow black actually to play move bishop d7, threatening this very pawn. So now it's a little bit trickier. If we castle, there's also bishop c4, again hitting our pawn twice. I don't see anything else but castling. And I think castling long sorts the problem. It sorts the problem because now if bishop g4 we have f3. If bishop d7 we can have move like rook d6. Yes, bishop d7, we have rook d6, and then knight e4 would be losing the bishop. And if bishop c6, rook c6, then knight takes e4. Bishop e4 and rook b6 is going to give us some material, but it's getting a little bit too complicated for no reason. Pawn to f5. That looks like something that could potentially be helping us. As we mark, can we not play e5 here? If you push a pawn to e5, f4 happens. We have only 18 seconds left, so now is the time to start playing really fast. Now is the time to speed up, like a demon. Knight to e4, so we're gonna protect. The next move is just to push the f3 pawn forward, or to bishop c4 happens. Okay. So we will play bishop takes e4 first. So I think the position slightly collapsed for us. Bishop f1 is a mistake though, because we have intermezzo checking the king. So black was supposed to take on e4 and they would be fine, but they made this mistake and now we should get to live. And I think pushing a pawn forward will be the best idea. It's good that the color came purple on the clock, so I could notice that we are actually in time pressure. So we were 2 pawns up and we were in a really difficult situation. Bishop c4 was a really good find for our opponent. So hitting our bishop, so we simply bolster the bishop. This is why the pawns are so So good to have. Now we are going to hit the rook first with the move knight d4. The idea is to just simply win the pawn on b5. And if the rook sacrifice comes here and cd5, then we should be very simply winning. Just simply by pushing the pawn to e7, and that would be end of the game. Luckily we had enough time to, and quite simple position to be able to wrap this up. One of the big threats that black can create is to play rook to c8 with the idea to take on d5, as we will not be able to recapture thanks to this king being pinned. But again, that's something that we can actually even afford to lose a piece like that. Rook h2. It's attacking the pawn, but the pawn is more or less protected anyway. So we are going to attack the rook. The rook cannot go on this square because knight f7 is a fork to the king and the rook. And also at the same time, even if the rook goes here, we have already pushed on to e7. So that's simply the next move that's going to come. And it doesn't matter what black is going to do, we are going to win another rook. And after e7, I would expect that black will finally concede. So actually rook e7 happens, which is actually a fair move. What can black do with the rook on h2? Not a very lot. So we can actually play knight f5, go with the idea of pushing the e7 and then playing bishop c6. It is simply unstoppable. We can play bishop c6 straight away. No, we have to play e7 first. Rook h5 is a fair move. We can protect the knight, but that would not be the point. Again, we have only 18 seconds. Yeah, so we are going to lose the pawn on e7, which is a shame. Something we cannot prevent. And with 20 seconds, we need to do a couple of a really quick move. Rook g5 is not the move we want to be playing. We have bishop f7. Rook takes f5 happens. We will take here. Rook e5 happens. We will play again here. Rook takes, protect the bishop. King g8 makes sense, and start pushing another pawn. King f7 happens, we keep on pushing. It's simply something that's hard to stop. Black can only try and get some checks here. But again, that's not going to work. So black is resigning. have won yet another game with an endgame this time. It was not very convincing, I must say, that at some point Black had a really good chance to bring the game to us. The bishop c4 move was very strong, but the follow-up from there was lacking, and I believe I overcomplicated the position at some point too much. But that's okay. We can always learn from our mistakes. So, yes, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.